Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, and if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Apple or Spotify, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for listening or watching. Once again, I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Dr. Joanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. I noted yesterday both of our football teams won, Packers and Cardinals.
It was a good day, less yelling.
In your household.
Indeed.
We have a phenomenal guest today joining us from the Bay Area, Dr. Lawrence Ford. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Ford.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
You are so welcome. Thank you for joining us. If it's all right with you, Dr. Ford, let's go with the first names, Lawrence, Joe, and Jeff.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Well, Jeff, I have been so excited about this as we talk a lot about mentors on our podcast. When I was a student, I saw Dr. Ford speak at an ACFAS lecture, and I was interested in the program because I appreciated the way that he approached this particular topic in his talk. So I went and visited the program and to turn, and I was definitely interested in the program. So he's been a bit, and so I'm really excited to have him on Dean's Chat today. Dr. Ford, we're going to do a brief intro, but we're going to kind of go through your bio as we go through all the talking points because there's so many interesting things to dive into. But right now, Dr. Ford works in Kaiser Oakland with the Kaiser Permanente as a faculty attending for the San Francisco Bay Area Foot and Ankle Residency Program. You've held many leadership positions with the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons as an oral examiner, part of the committee for the testing, as well as the communications committee currently, and also the previous department chief for podiatric surgery for Kaiser East Bay. But let's go all the way back. You were born in Wales. So again, I love listening to you talk. I have a thing for accents, so it makes it easier for me to focus on the things that you talk about. And then you kind of grew up in Southern California with your undergraduate degree in UC Irvine, and you got your degree in biology. Tell us a little bit about how you found podiatric medicine and what that journey looked like for you.
So actually, a correction, I grew up, I call my American home Auburn, which is in Northern California.
Oh, I thought it was Southern California.
I went to high school in Auburn and then went to college in Southern California at UC Irvine.
Fantastic.
And while I was down there in undergrad, I was biology and I was trying to figure out, what did I want to do? And I was drawn towards medicine, and then there's so many different parts of medicine. And I was influenced by a couple of upperclassmates, Charlie Peebles and Jeff Hop, who both ended up going into podiatry and sort of told me about it. I was ignorant about it when I was an undergrad. And I started shadowing a really influential foot and ankle surgeon down in Mission Viejo called Dr. Victor Kasher. And I'd follow him on Friday mornings, and I'd watch him do surgery. It was the first time I was ever in the operating room. And I was just mesmerized by, just everything about him, his aura, his skill. How he communicated with all the other hospital staff and the doctors, and the types of surgeries he did, the patients he had. And going back to his office sometimes after surgery and seeing the mix of clinic and surgery. And I followed him around for months on Friday mornings, and then followed Charlie Peebles and Jeff Hop to the California College of Podiatric Medicine up in San Francisco. And ended up there.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's where you met Graham Hamilton?
Yeah.
You became buddies? How did that start?
That's a funny story. So it was really first day, the very first week is orientation, and you're getting your financial aid sorted out, and you're meeting the professors and all that. And I was in the cafeteria, and I kind of heard this this accent that I recognized, and he's got a lot of riz, he's got a lot of personality, and he immediately said something to me like, "Hey, you English, mate?" Actually, no, I'm Welsh. And I go, "You Australian?" He goes, "No, I'm South African." And kind of hit off from there, and we just started really bonding and hanging out and studying together, and became roommates and friends. And that friendships continue to today.
Yeah. That's spectacular. And we'll come back to some of that, I'm sure, as we continue through the history. So you did your podiatric medical degree with California College of Podiatric Medicine, and then went on to do your 3-year surgical residency program with one of the top programs at the time, and still to this day, the Swedish Medical Center. At the time was Waldo. Can you talk a little bit about that program and your experience while you were there?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I mean, it was well known as a student that it was one of the top programs in the country, and I did well in school, but it's pretty competitive, and I feel like I got really lucky, and I got the program. And my last year in school, 4th year, when I was at LA County Hospital, USC, and I was on this orthopedics rotation, and I'd already got accepted to the Seattle program, and a couple of these senior orthopedic residents had found out that I was and I felt automatic respect, from them, and they didn't know who I was or the program I was going to. And so I went up to Seattle, and I was a little bit worried that I kind of had imposter syndrome, that maybe I wasn't worthy of this top program, and look at all these fantastic graduates and attendings that had come from there. And so I buckled down and really took it really seriously. But a couple of months into that program, we had an AO conference, AO Basic Principles, and it was in Colorado Springs, and we all went as residents. And it was the first time where I was really exposed nationally to how influential my residency program was and the attendings from it. And they were superstars at this conference, where they were leaders and lecturers, and it was a huge conference with a lot of collaboration with really well-known attendings from around the country in different pockets. And that was when I realized, I'm in a really top place here, where a lot of the thought leaders in our profession are coming from. And this was around the time, so this is 96 to 99. It was around the time where, in retrospect, I look back at it as kind of like the zeitgeist of, first ray instability and Lapidus and even gastroc equinus, and that started to become sort of common terminology, and really the beginning of influence in the rest of the country on the Lapidus, which, as you know now, is pretty ubiquitous in foot and ankle surgery, but it wasn't then.
Yeah. And that was the topic you were lecturing on, was gastroc equinus.
Oh, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the topics I'm passionate about and still talk about. Yeah. But yeah, I was immediately, I feel honored to have got that residency program, and it was really a huge stepping stone in helping me in my career.
And you did a research fellowship with Dr. Sig Hansen. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like working with him?
Well, all of us as residents got to spend 4 months with Dr. Hansen in our last year, and we just basically absorbed it through osmosis, just what he had to talk about and speak about, and he was just so influential on not just the foot and ankle community in the country, but the local podiatric community. And it was such a it was such a pleasure to see collaboration and collegiality, and really the opportunity we had to work under him, and to be exposed to what he was exposed to. I mean, he's in a tertiary care center, University of Washington, seeing the most complex stuff that you could see, and for him to be so welcoming to us and to allow us to be educated by him, and for him to be so back and forth with the attendings that we had at Fifth Avenue or Waldo or Swedish, and the different name iterations. I think he was a massive influence on the residency program, and therefore a massive influence on podiatry in general.
Absolutely. We certainly saw that. We used to make the joke that Kaiser San Francisco was South Seattle because it started to attract several of the Swedish trained faculty. to practice there, and obviously had a huge impact on our training. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship of how that program became affiliated with Dr. Hansen, and like how did that even get started?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's really sort of third person because I wasn't there, but I want to say it was the early 70s, maybe mid 70s. Stan Newell, who was a podiatrist and one of the early attendings, along with Gary Dockery up in Seattle, became friends with Hansen, who was, I guess, a recent graduate or a new attending at the University of Washington, and they worked together and shared ideas, and that influenced the residency program that Dockery had started, and that just led from there to where there was a lot of university and orthopedic sort of exposure to that residency program, and a lot of influence too. So, Hansen basically he focused on how does the foot work, and how does it fail, and how do you fix it? And you have to fix it by addressing it at its root cause, or its etiology. And as you know, Joe, that he was influenced heavily by Paul Lapidus and also by Dudley Morton, who's an anatomist, which all of this led to sort of advances in foot and ankle surgery centered around this concept of gastrocnemius equinus and first ray instability, which are evolutionary or atavistic traits. And therefore, the feeling was that the reason the foot fails is because it hasn't fully evolved into this rigid lever that's adapted for forward locomotion. And it wasn't until Hansen came around that really the technology caught up with the concept, and now there was internal fixation and lag screws and such to where he could accomplish that Paul Lapidus tried to accomplish, a few decades earlier.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I got lots of thoughts. I've been writing down notes here. I graduated from the California College of Podiatric Medicine also, Lawrence, and I graduated in 91. And you mentioned orientation. I remember like it was yesterday, parties in Golden Gate Park. And then we showed up for the first day of class, and Barbara Kriz was teaching lower extremity anatomy. And she got up in front of the class and she said, "All right, the party's over." Did you have Dr. Kriz also?
I did. Yeah, I was one of her two TAs. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Teacher assistant. Yeah, for lower extremity anatomy. She was great.
She was fabulous. And I think it's interesting because there's this common theme. We're interviewing lots of very prominent podiatrists on Dean's Chat, you being one of them, and that the link between the biomechanics that you learn in California, and then you couple that with a high-powered surgical training program such as Waldo, and my gosh, great things happen when you treat the etiology of the problem, not just the problem. So kudos to that entire team. Must have been awesome being a student knowing you were going to Waldo, right?
Yeah, I felt really lucky. I felt, like really fortunate that I got a good residency program. And then I thought, well, that's a really good foundation for going from there. And there's a lot of academics up there. So you can't help but get educated,
right?
Just from listening. But then it was also a very, demanding program too, where you had to put in the effort and you had to do research, and Jeff Christensen was behind that, and he's a brilliant mind, and he was pushing the research, and there's twofold to that. For one, it helped us because we got exposed to research, but also helped the program because this program starts pushing out all these published papers and obviously that influenced a lot of stuff that was done since then.
Certainly continues to recruit more students that are interested in those same kind of opportunities, which is a really nice segue into how did you end up in Kaiser Oakland, and you were the residency director for a while. So could you talk a little bit about when you left the Swedish program, how did you end up where you are?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So, when I was in Seattle, I would have gone anywhere. Like I would have, gone to the middle of America and taken on a good job. I thought it'd be a great adventure. But having lived in San Francisco and then lived in Seattle, which I think two just fantastic cities, and they really opened my mind. And the opportunity to come back to California was too much to resist. And when I was a student, I saw the Kaiser attendings and the Kaiser programs, and I thought, oh my God, this is where podiatry should be. This is, they're integrated into the hospital system here, and they're given the privilege of being responsible for all foot and ankle care, in Kaiser Permanente. So I already knew that, Kaiser was a really good career path and really good residency programs too. So it's always in the back of my mind that I'd like that. And I through so many applications, called and all over, the West Coast. But Graham Hamilton, who had gone to Kaiser Santa Clara, really well trained, was a year ahead of me because I'd done that extra bit in Seattle, and he started practice down in Thousand Oaks in Southern California. And so during my last year, we're like, oh, I'm going to come down. I'm going to join you. He was starting from scratch. Oh, we're so well trained. We were patting ourselves on the back. Oh, we're going to turn this into the Mecca and make it real academic, and won't be long before we're flying. And right as that my third year came to a close, all of a sudden job offers opened up. And one of them was at Sutter in Sacramento. And at this point, my parents lived just outside Sacramento, and Sacramento's pretty close to Auburn. So I thought that's pretty cool. But it was a locum tenens position to cover somebody who was going out for a total hip replacement. And as that opened up, I also found out that Kaiser South Sacramento were looking for a 1-year position to fill in for. So Kaiser South Sacramento, if you don't know, had a really excellent reputation. Steve DeValentine and Tim Blakesley, and they were doing everything way ahead of their time. And Tim Blakesley was going to go on a round the world bicycle trip, and he needed someone to cover him for a year, and knew that I was doing this locum tenens. So I said, yes, that sounds great. But it was just a 1-year position, and I was a little bit worried about what does that mean long term. So I told Graham this around the time, like, hey, this has happened. Right as that happened, a couple of positions opened up. That Jack Schubert told me about. One of them was at Kaiser Redwood City. And the other one was Kaiser Oakland, which already was known because they had a residency program, even though it started as second and third years. And I interviewed for them, and I got job offers. And the Kaiser Redwood City one was more attractive to me. They'd never had a podiatrist there before. They had someone who had done some menial work for a couple of days a week, but not as a partner. And most of the foot and ankle surgery was done by the chief of orthopedics there. And when they interviewed me, it felt like, I don't want to say they rolled the red carpet out, but I felt important. And I felt wanted. And they were impressed with where I'd come from, my training, and I immediately said, yes, I'd love to. So I finished the Sutter job in Sacramento and had to break the news to South Sacramento that I wouldn't go, and I felt really bad about that. So I get on the phone to Graham and go, hey, this is what's going on. I don't want to be insulting because, maybe you're really excited about where you're going. I go, but Kaiser Oakland and Kaiser South Sacramento are hiring. He immediately interviews and gets both jobs. Takes the Kaiser Oakland job. So I'm now at Kaiser Redwood City.
Interesting.
I'm at Kaiser Redwood City. He's at Kaiser Oakland, and now we're both living in San Francisco. This is early 30s, and now we're like, yeah, this is what a great life, great jobs, great city, and I'd say the rest is history. But there's actually quite a lot more that happened, between then and now. Redwood City was just a perfect starting place, where I was given a lot of responsibility straight away. All the ankle trauma, the whole spectrum of foot and ankle surgery. And, some of it was a little over my head, but luckily I had Jack Schuberth in San Francisco to call and say, hey, can you help me? It's one of those things when you first get out, you don't take on a calc fracture by yourself. You make sure that you've got all your ducks lined in a row and that you're set up for success. And so he was a massive help for me when I started. And I also got really fortunate that my orthopedic colleagues in Redwood City were fantastic. And they're people that you would end up knowing because they became attendings in a residency program, like Stefano Bini and George Yanku and Mike Vostres and others. And my first week there, the chief of orthopedics had said, hey, I'm doing this triple arthrodesis on this patient. Do you mind coming in and helping? So I said, yeah, sure. It's my first week. I'm real eager. And we get in there, and he goes, yeah, why don't you do it? Show me how you do it. So you can imagine how nervous I was. And however, it was a foot that perhaps we wouldn't recommend because it was quite flexible and supple, but it made it pretty easy. So just the incisional approach, getting down to the joint and debriding the joint and setting it all up. And he was very complimentary. And I also overheard him on the phone talking kind of loud through on the office, like, oh, God, yeah, it was so slick. And it only, took 2 hours. There's none of this, what you always hear about them taking 5 or 6 hours. And I thought, oh, that's kind of what his preconceived judgment was about what it would be. So it set me up for success right away. It's just a lot of sort of fortunate events that happened. So then I was at Redwood City and, working hard, but then realizing, oh my God, I'm on call 24/7.
Yeah.
This is pretty rough, but it's a great first few years. And then Graham is over at Oakland and he's got residents.
Yeah.
And it's something, having come from Seattle in the residency program, how much academics there was, that's what I missed the most. So I kind of angled my way to eventually get over to Kaiser Oakland with Graham. And that's how we ended up practicing together at Oakland Kaiser.
And there was a residency that was there. When did the consortium start where they integrated San Francisco, Oakland, and the Walnut Creek, Diablo service area?
So within a couple of years. So yeah, there was a program that had been around for a while, but only had a second and third year position. No first year position. Okay. So it was usually taking first years that completed a year and then wanted the extra training.
Okay.
And Kaiser Walnut Creek had one second year position. So that's 3 positions within Kaiser. And Kaiser San Francisco, where Schuberth was, had visiting residents. Mm-hmm. I visited as a Seattle resident my third year. I spent 4 months in San Francisco, under Schuberth, which that was also just a massive influence and an eye-opening experience. I remember in the middle of the night, you'd remember this, Joe, because you had many cases like this. Middle of the night, I was tired, and there was this ankle fusion, infected, non-union, and had to take an IM nail out, from the bottom of the heel, and this pus, and it's infected, and we're using this bottle brush, from the bottom of the heel up the tibia, scooping out like this and washing and everything. And I remember Schuberth turned to me and he goes, Ford, if you want to be a big surgeon, you got to deal with big complications. And that's as big a complication as you could have, right?
Yeah.
And but yeah, it opened my eyes, and to really like kind of the extent of what we do. But I digress. But going back to that residency program, so Tim Binning, who was the residency director at that time, he was really the person who was instrumental and in charge of creating the consortium. And he went to Jack Schuberth in San Francisco and to Steve Silvani and Mike Colburn and Shannon Rush who in Walnut Creek, and basically said, hey, why don't we 3 of us get together? And he worked through the graduate medical education department to combine our 3 into a big 3-year program. But because we were only sponsored for 3 positions, we needed help. So we joined with the VA.
Okay.
So the VA in San Francisco for the internship stuff. So a lot of that was through UCSF. And then all the second and third years came through Kaiser. And that morphed eventually into not needing the VA anymore. And we got all 9 positions sponsored within Kaiser after a few years of success with that consortium.
But we still had some rotations with UCSF, like general surgery.
Yeah, we kept those. Eventually brought a lot of them in-house.
Mm-hmm.
But it became a very attractive program right away. You're kind of joking calling it Seattle South, but that's exactly what they called it at the time, because there were quite a few Seattle graduates that had come down. Obviously, the biggest Schubert, but then within a 2 or 3 year period, there's me, there's Shannon Rush,
Mm-hmm.
Graham Hamilton, who's kind of an adopted Seattleite, even though he went to Kaiser Santa Clara, because he really adopted a lot of the same philosophies of Hansen and Christensen and all them. And then Danny Chung and Neil Blitz in Santa Rosa, and all of a sudden there's this kind of Seattle influence down here, where it used to be more influenced by Roger Mann, right, from San Leandro, Oakland, which if you're familiar with some of that philosophy, it's kind of polar opposite to what Hansen believed in, which was gastrocnemius equinus and first ray instability. And so Kaiser started to get influenced by this biomechanics. And if you're going to do surgery, then you need to address the faulty mechanics. And that really, I think, is a sort of a paradigm shift in the way the foot was treated at that time.
And that was definitely, I was telling Jeff when we were talking before, when I came up to visit as a second year, and I swear it was probably only like a 20-minute conversation, but you were asking me about, we were looking at x-rays, going through cases, and you were asking me about biomechanics, and it was very obvious that I did not understand. I was a second year, so I didn't understand a lot of things, but it was that moment of engaging me in a conversation in a way that made it very practical and made it very interesting. And I remember coming home and just like, I want to think this way. I want to be able to problem solve this way. And I want to be able to understand how the foot functions so that I really understand how I, as a surgeon, are going to impact that. And it was such an incredible learning experience. And we'll touch on it more as we go into education a little bit. But it's so interesting to hear how the evolution of a program goes. And I know in the beginning, you guys, again, the reason that my mentor had said you need to go check out this program was all of the publications that were coming out of the San Francisco consortium. You have been a previous research director for the San Francisco Bay Area residency program. You've published your own myriad of peer-reviewed journals, review articles, as well as textbook chapters. And you've also been the section editor and a journal review participant with the Journal of Foot and Ankle Surgery. Tell us a little bit about research and what that looked like maybe in the early days, or even now. I know you continue to do things. What does research kind of mean to you, and why do you think it's useful?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in undergrad, I did some research, and that was all part of like trying to make the CV look good and all this, and so I was a bit exposed to it, which might have helped me get the Seattle program, because Jeff Christensen was really big into research. I don't know. I've never asked him that directly, but he had there was a lot of emphasis on original research up in Seattle. And a lot of it was bench research, cadaveric research. And so we were all assigned a research project, when we first got up there. And I remember sitting in this meeting, and he turned to me, and some of the older residents, the senior residents, were doing this pretty sexy stuff like subtalar joint instability, like what is it, and Christensen says, yeah, I want you to look at this kind of crossover second toe, and I immediately felt deflated, like, oh, I've come all the way up here to Seattle, where it's going to practicing at the top of our profession, and you're giving me a toe. Well, I dived into it, and that's how I started learning about plantar plate insufficiency and stuff like that. And I ended up doing some research on that. happened, he knew what he was doing. Christensen knew what he was doing. He had his finger on the pulse. Mm-hmm. And this ended up being a kind of a topic that was, there was a lot of interest in that topic. And there still is today, because we all know that the most packed lecture hall at the annual meeting is usually second toe. That's because it's 2024 and we still don't really know what we're doing. We can't predictably get that second toe on the ground every time. Sometimes we think we do. So that led to a little bit of interest in the research project that I was assigned and that I got published on, and that led me to an invitation to lecture on it. And that kind of opened some doors there. But as I then, moved to Kaiser, Northern California, and we've got this consortium going, one of the very first sort of missives of our program was research. Like, we're going to make sure that this is a research-oriented residency program. So from the very get-go, it was every resident's going to have to attempt to publish research. And it's going to be original research. But because we didn't really have the time or the resources that they had up in Seattle with NWPF, or now IFAF, and Jeff Christensen's biomechanics lab, it was like, well, how do we get past this IRB approval? Because how do you get that done in 3 years? You can't do a randomized, double-blind, controlled study out of Kaiser. So it was, maybe we need to focus on retrospective reviews. And things where there's not so much touchy-feely stuff with patients. So it might have been radiographic reviews. And that's kind of how it got started. Like, what's the non-union rate of the lapidus that we all do this same way? Debridement of the joint and screw fixation. And so we thought, number one, that will help with our residency program and, basically not just giving back to the profession, but, being leaders in the profession. And at the same time, those are the kind of residents we want, that are those that are interested in pursuing this. And we also thought, publishing research and generating ideas and influencing, foot and ankle surgery, that's the way we want to go as a residency program. And so right away from the very beginning, that there was an emphasis on that. And that evolved into a fair amount of excellent resident research over the years.
What are your thoughts, Jeff? I know you're also very research advocate. What are your thoughts?
Lawrence, that was all music to my ears. And Joan knows this. At the college, we encourage our students to do student-initiated research, and we give scholarships for it, and we team them up with different doctors that are experts in that area. Twofold reason, though. One is you learn a lot about one topic, just doing literature reviews and doing research. But the second, and I tell all of our students that, maybe it's not a secret really about Arizona, but if you do research and it's on your CV and you go to an interview at a top program, they are going to ask you about your research, and you can't get that answer wrong. And it proves that a couple things. One is that you can have the initiative, as you said, to go above and beyond the call of duty from the curriculum. And that's what all top residencies are looking for. And it also proves that when the pager goes off at midnight, you're going to show up and debride that infected ankle and not complain about it. So there's a lot of things going on there. And I just think it's interesting how top programs are all looking for the same things in their residents.
Yeah, well, I think it also speaks to a certain work ethic, right? And I might be jumping the gun if you're going to ask this question, but I think one of the things that's most important in selecting residents is work ethic, like desire, hunger, like really wanting to study, really wanting to learn, really wanting to get the best training, and not being happy when a case gets canceled because you got free time to go home and do nothing. So yeah, I think it also is a differentiator in selecting residents. Finding out those who have done research and those that are willing to put that time in, knowing that it's, in a sense, sort of extracurricular.
Well, it's right? It's an indicator.
Yeah, it's an indicator. But it's not demanded by CPME.
Right.
But it's some of these residency programs that really focus on research. It's a bit more than just publishing a paper.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's interesting because when I started with Dan Hatch, we started the North Colorado residency program, and we would have all these applications come in for a program, and we would have a separate pile for students that did research.
Yeah, look at Dan Hatch now. He's publishing like no one's business.
Dan's incredible. I really enjoyed working with Dan for many years.
That's actually maybe also a nice little segue into, you know, along with research often comes education. Dr. Ford, you have been a big source of inspiration, clearly in my own personal journey, but not just to me. I know you've been a huge influence on so many other residents and even students that have gotten the opportunity to learn from you. You had taught for some courses for me when I was faculty there at Samuel Merritt University, and I know you still have some opportunities to engage with students in that regard. But even all of the residents over the courses of years, you're also faculty for AO North America and this current AO ACFAS collaborative project. You've been an instrumental part as part of the education. Also been the previous chairman of the annual scientific conference for the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons, as well as a committee member and chairman for the Education and Scientific Affairs Committee, including many of the skills courses, such as the arthroscopy course. You're a huge arthroscopist, one of the main people that I've learned that skill and continued that passion and passing down that passion to the students that I teach. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with arthroscopy and how that, and then education in general, but we'll start with arthroscopy. How did that start for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, when you say it like that, and you list all this, I didn't know. I certainly, it sounds much more impressive than how I certainly view myself. So arthroscopy yeah, that's an interesting question, because I don't want to be too self-deprecating, but I was terrible, and I think it might be because I didn't really do much video games and stuff like that when I was younger. And in residency, I was exposed to a lot of arthroscopy, but I was pretty insecure. I didn't really feel that confident with it. I was always afraid, well, what if I can't see anything? What if it's all red? Or what is it too much fluid? Is it not enough fluid? All this kind of stuff. And so when I first got out, I was friends with one of my orthopedic sports medicine colleagues, who I would always ask, like, hey, do you mind assisting me with this? And after a while, he would just sit there on the side with his arms folded, not scrubbing, and go, seriously, do I even need to be here? And that was around the time where I started like just going off on my own. But the reason I bring this up is because everybody's different. Right? I feel like I was a slow developer with arthroscopy and needed a lot of cases, and then others that I've trained, they get it first day. Where the left hand goes up, and on the screen it's going down to the right. And it's natural. Arthroscopy is something that I think some people are going to get it naturally, and some people aren't. But it just might mean that you need more experience or more cases, more exposure to get in there. And there's some great arthroscopy courses that are put on, IFAF, ACFAS, where you can get these skills. But it's also something where there's a lot of pathology that is amenable to arthroscopic surgery, including hardware removal following ankle fractures, where they've got some synovitis and they've got any joint line tenderness, then might as well go in there and do that at the same time. But yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question, other than some people are just masters of arthroscopy from day one, and some take a little bit longer. And I was definitely one that took a little bit longer before I felt confident with my skills.
And then in terms of educating, you had talked a little bit when we had previously chatted, as you educate residents, can you talk a little bit about the early days of the program, how you structured some of your academics, some of the radiology rounds that you guys would do, and how that influenced some of the work that was happening.
Yeah. So with the consortium in the beginning, we said, all right, every Wednesday evening, all the residents are required to be here at 6 p.m. and we are going to do academics, whether that was journal club, cadaver rounds, lectures, whatever. And so that set the tone very early on. And at the same time, at Oakland, we had an orthopedic surgery residency program that was based out of St. Mary's in San Francisco. And we were geographically separated, orthopedics and podiatry at the time. And our residents were separated other than, sharing call and sometimes, scrubbing in cases. But when we started at Kaiser Oakland, and this is when Hamilton and I joined, we didn't have ankle fracture privileges, right? That went to orthopedics. We had all the foot. So the attendings that were before us was Jim Fagan, Tim Binning, and Ken Rapp. They'd already been doing calcaneal fractures and talus fractures and all this trauma, but they never really given the ankles. Now, I had just come from Redwood City where I got them all. So it kind of felt a little bit unfair and unjust when we moved to Oakland that we weren't getting the ankles. But more importantly, our residents weren't really getting exposed to the ankle trauma. So we started collaborating more with the orthopedic residency program, such that, hey, our residents need ankles and your residents want and need foot. So let's combine. So we started another, I don't want to say it was weekly, I think it was monthly morning rounds where it was all the orthopedic residents and podiatric residents in one room with attendings, and the topics would shift. But there was a lot more engagement and interest from the podiatric attendings than the orthopedic attendings. So what ended up happening was I looked at this as the best way to win people over. You catch more bees with honey, right? We don't want to be hiding stuff. We want to show them what we do, because at that time I don't necessarily know that they knew the extent to what was being done because of this geographic separation. And lo and behold, their residents were really interested and wanted to start scrubbing our cases. And at the same time, Jim Fagan, our chief of podiatry at the time, had basically said, hey, Hamilton and Ford should be doing ankles. They're trained to do it. There's no reason other than political reasons to not do this. And so we started doing ankles. I think you had Graham Hamilton on this podcast a while ago, and he's probably spoke to this as well. And so it went through, and it said, yeah, but we want to proctor you. And we said, yeah, absolutely, that's fine. Yeah, no problem. And it didn't take long. And there's some young orthopedic surgeons that weren't so cemented in their beliefs about the political differences and the skills differences between podiatry and orthopedics, and it allayed their fears. And within a year we're doing them all. Pretty much 100% of ankle fractures Kaiser Oakland was being done by podiatry, and it just led to doors that opened, and much more collaboration between our two residency programs, and more interest. And it's better for everybody. It's better for our residents, better for the ortho residents, and better for the collegiality between orthopedics and podiatry. And that continues today.
Better for the patient.
Go ahead.
Better for the patient. But I want to emphasize, this is all based on academics.
Ambassadorship.
Yeah.
Being willing to be vulnerable.
But it's focusing on quality.
Yeah.
And academics, and what is the latest, and this is a bimal equivalent. How do you fix this? This is a posterior mal with a not so large, an ankle fracture with a not so large posterior mal. What's the latest? Mm-hmm. And you talk about it, and after a while, everybody realizes, oh God, we all know a lot. And now we're sharing information and feeding off each other, and that is great for everybody. And like you said, Jeff, for the patients too, of course. So yeah, I'm really proud of that kind of the beginnings of the residency program as we know it now.
Phenomenal
And don't
history.
forget, Jack Schubert in San Francisco had been doing ankle trauma for a couple of decades at this point, and was the go-to man in Northern California. You know, one of the things I actually like to think about is the fact that Northern California Kaiser is a 4 million member population, right? So I think it's something like 40% market share of the insured population of Northern California is Kaiser. In Oakland, it's even great. It's like greater than 75%. So if you think about it, that's a small Scandinavian country. And this small Scandinavian country has allowed or provided podiatry with this opportunity to take care of all the foot and ankle complaints or problems in this small country. And this has been going on for 30 years or more, and they've done a fantastic job. And these are attendings that far preceded me.
Lawrence, I thought a couple of comments you made touched home. One was you only get one chance to make a first impression. When you did the triple at Redwood City, and you did a great job, and you could overhear him on the phone. That is just tremendous.
I got lucky though, because it was an easy triple. It was easier than what I'd been trained to do, and so it kind of fell into place.
Yeah, but luck is when you've done the training, you've done the academics, you've done the cases, and preparation meets opportunity, as they say. So I thought that was a great story. The second question I was going to ask you, you had mentioned early on, you had imposter syndrome going up to Swedish, or Waldo at the time. Does that leave you, or does that carry through with each new opportunity? I just think imposter syndrome is a topic that you see on LinkedIn. You see it everywhere. I think we've all experienced it at some time in our life. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, one remedy for it is good training.
Absolutely.
So, and with that good training, I became a bit more opinionated, a lot more opinionated, and certainly more passionate about certain subjects and confident. And so I felt that I was able to speak, somewhat intelligently about these subjects of what I'd learned. And so the imposter syndrome kind of, diminished with time. But I mean, there's other parts of my life where I could still succumb to that for sure. But yeah, I think the remedy for that is hard work and preparation and really, getting passionate and interested in the subject.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the discussion we had with Ron Ray. We talked about that a little bit too, about preparation and giving talks. And, in order to give a talk on a subject, you got to know a whole lot about that subject if you're going to narrow it down and come across as credible, right? Yeah. So I just think those are fun things to talk about.
And kind of goes into your confidence and competence that you talked to too, Jeff, that, with time and practice and good training, you build the skills to feel more confident. And then through that confidence, you build even more competence. And the circle goes round and round. And again, I'll throw a little dose of humility in there. I mean, as we've been talking about some of these accolades and various things that you've done, you do still carry a sense of humility about the work that you do and the opportunities that you've had. And again, I think that speaks a lot. It's not to continue to move forward, having the willingness to learn and to be vulnerable. And you can't do that if you're coming into it with a bunch of hubris. And so I guess as we're starting to get a little short on time, my last question, then Jeff, I'll leave it to you, is all work and no play makes Ford a very boring human. So tell us how you recharge your batteries. What are the things that light you?
Well, God, I mean, I have a lot of interests outside of work. God, I don't know where to start, really. I mean, I love the outdoors, and a lot of things that come with the outdoors whether that's hiking, backpacking, fishing, backcountry skiing. I love. I always have been a soccer fan, right? So that takes up a lot of my free time that I enjoy. Family stuff, and trying to learn instruments. I was never musical. I was just STEM, math and science. I always looked at, like, I don't need to study Welsh, and I don't care about music, and all this kind of stuff, literature. What good is that going to do? It wasn't until my 20s that I was like, oh God, I've missed out on so much here, and now this part of my brain, those channels are opening a little bit, and I felt a little bit left behind. So now I've spent the rest of my life trying to catch up on the arts and literature that I dismissed when I was younger. I mean, the same stuff that a lot of people would say. I love traveling, experiencing different cultures, yeah, I've got all sorts of loves outside of podiatry.
Yeah, if we do, again, only because we're running short on time, but that just triggers something that I forgot to mention. Dr. Ford has done some global health work with Operation Rainbow, I believe, and you guys have gone to Bolivia.
Yeah.
Same location, correct?
Yeah, but so Bolivia, I mean, you think about Bolivia, that's an outpost. That's not an ordinary, tourist country, but it's a fantastic country. Yeah. Great people, felt very safe, so many things to do. And really the heart of that part of South America, and that's just the cultural part. Not even to mention all the great work we did with congenital foot deformities and clubfoot and the like. And I would recommend getting involved with that sort of global outreach to anybody, because it's educational. We learn a lot. We can bring it back to our own lives and our own practices. And it's very impactful to the people that you're helping down there. So yeah, that's a great point, Joe. That's stuff. That's the sort of thing I wouldn't mind doing the rest of my life.
Yeah,
it's awesome. I'm going to kind of piggyback onto some of Joe's questions, kind of like quick questions for you. Like, who's your favorite soccer team?
Oh, I know that one.
Go on, Joe.
Tottenham.
Yeah, Tottenham.
Tottenham. Very good.
So much so that every time now I hear either Chelsea, which is Graham's team, or Tottenham, because it would always come up when they would play each other. I can visualize both of them in my head when I see those two teams. It's a very fun game.
That's great.
Tottenham goes as far back as I can remember. I mean, my mom's side of the family were all Tottenham supporters, so I didn't really have a choice, and my son didn't have a choice either, and he's a massive Tottenham fan too. Although these days he goes, I kind of wish you'd have been a Liverpool fan, Dad.
I went over for a Champions League game once, and Manchester United was playing Glasgow, and that's when I learned that soccer isn't a sport; it's a religion.
Oh yeah, well that was that might not have been that long ago. That was at Celtic or Rangers.
It was Rangers.
Yeah, I think I remember that because there was a bit of hooliganism outside the ground before that game. But those are two massive clubs.
Absolutely. And when people from Glasgow would come down to buy fish and chips in Manchester, they wouldn't even serve them. They'd say, your money's no good here. It's crazy. Okay, more questions. You get a 4-day backpacking trip. Where are you going?
4 days. So that rules out Patagonia, which
it does. But Patagonia is awesome.
Which I haven't been to. I would probably say the John Muir Wilderness, the Golden Trout Wilderness in the Sierras, and partly because we were going to go there a few years ago, right before COVID, and it was that big fire. I think it might have been a campfire. I forget the names of the fires, but it was just a few days before we were going to go, and it got closed. And the John Muir Wilderness, if you don't know, is the largest contiguous area in the continental United States, greater than 10,000 feet elevation.
I did not know that.
You wouldn't think it, because Colorado's got a lot more, high mountains and 14ers. But in terms of an area that doesn't drop below 10,000 feet, the largest contiguous area is John Muir Wilderness. And there's also an area where there's golden trout, which I've never seen. So
Very
it's
nice.
always, that's kind of, I'd probably pick that.
I like that.
And it's where they filmed Star Wars. That's
Oh,
Really?
yeah. Oh, come on, you have to have known this.
Well, I knew they
Oh, and
filmed.
I totally just
I knew they
spaced it.
filmed like Return of the Jedi in Marin.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I just totally blanked on it. The one with the Ewoks, where
Yeah.
the Ewoks live.
Yeah.
I can't believe I totally just spaced on this. I'm gonna get teased so hard for this from my family. Anyway, fun facts.
okay. Next one. Backcountry skiing. Favorite place to do that?
So, God, I got into backcountry skiing because of Christine Dobrowolski, who's a podiatrist who ended up, moving to Tahoe, and she and her husband were big backcountry skiers, and I would just snowshoe, and then we'd go out, and her husband had skis on, and it looked so much more fun, even though we're all going the same pace. And so I got to really know Tahoe for backcountry skiing, especially the west in Desolation Wilderness and southwest and towards Carson Pass in that area. But probably one of the best areas is that I've been to is outside of Tioga Pass, in the eastern Sierras.
Yeah.
But the place I hear that's the best is northeastern Nevada. So they've got a 13,000 foot peak there, and there's a fair amount of backcountry skiing, but it's such a drive. I've never gone there, but yeah, I think that's probably on the dream list.
I did a backcountry tour called the Elk Mountain Traverse from Crested Butte to Aspen, and that took every bit of the stamina I ever had. It was crazy, too high and too far.
Yeah.
All right, that's two last questions. Favorite book?
Oh, so yeah, quite a few, and I've thought of this before, and I've got quite a few, but I would say number one is actually The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas.
Wow, I'm about 12 hours into that audiobook.
Oh,
and I'm enjoying it, but I think I still have like 20 some hours to go.
I'm sure you do. But the best part is in the beginning when he's in the prison in the Chateau d'If, and he meets the monk or the abbé, and he gets educated.
That was fabulous, and especially how he snuck out and
best part. Yeah, yeah.
I like that. Okay, so last question for you. I understand you're learning how to play the piano. What song do you want to play ultimately on the piano?
So when I learned to play the piano, I mean, I'll be remedial until I die. So I can't read music. So I've learned piano by myself by kind of focused on this thing called the circle of fifths. So if there's any musicians out there who know exactly what I'm talking about. But really, I started with guitar, and you just kind of go from chord to chord to chord, a little chord progression. But there are a few chords I just couldn't do, such as like an F or a B because of the finger position. But on the piano, they're actually quite easy. So I just took what I'd learned on guitar and went to piano and started doing chords, chord progression, and that led to learning things like fifths and sevenths and flats and so I mean there's so many songs, but I'd say probably one of my favorite on the piano is Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding. And then David Byrne, what's it called? We're on a road to nowhere. That one, yeah, great song. But I mean, yeah, there's so many more that I haven't even thought about yet. And by the way, playing the piano is that's giving me a lot more credence than what I deserve.
Well, you know what they say about amateur, right? It's for the love. That's where the amare, love. You're not doing it to be an expert. You're doing it for the love of it.
Yeah, and it feels better than watching TV.
Yeah.
There you go. Joe and I were talking about interviewing you earlier, and I said, I saw your list of interests. I said, Dr. Ford's like a Renaissance man. I'm going to ask him a whole bunch of fun questions.
I'd say I'm a wannabe Renaissance. I wish I'd grown up like Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, where you could be a politician and a musician and a scientist and all of it together. Yeah, that'd be great.
Look what you created out of being assigned elevated second digit. I mean, really. Dr. Ford, Joe and I are so grateful that you were willing to come on Dean's Chat, and it was like a trip down memory lane, and really it's a bout of history. It's talking about one of the finest residency programs up in Seattle and how it morphed into Waldo South. Was that what you were calling it in San Francisco, Kaiser?
Yeah, Seattle South. Yeah, and it's just heavily influenced by Hansen and Christensen and Hutchinson, everybody up in Seattle.
It's interesting because Joe and I are always talking. Every time we interview somebody, we start texting. It's like, wow, that's incredible. One of the common themes of all the leaders in our profession is they've got tremendous mentors, yourself included.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Joe, any last words?
No, thank you so much, Dr. Ford, for everything, just from my own personal selfishness that you did to help me in my career at multiple phases. We didn't even get to go into like discussions about phases of life, but Ford has continued to be a mentor, Jeff, for me, and various ups and downs through my career. And one of my favorite, I just have to put this last plug. One of my favorite memories, I didn't get a job that I had applied for, and I was really, really disappointed. And we had gone to the AAOS conference in San Francisco. And instead of going to whatever the last thing was, he's like, come on, we're going to go have a beer. And we went to some dive bar in Chinatown. I could not pin this place on a map because we were just walking and talking. And then it just helped bring my spirits up. He told me about, the various different ways that his career went before he found the job that he loves. And it just really impacted me. So thank you for all that you've done for me. And then also for what you do for our profession and for the residents and all the time that you give, and to your family, to your son. And I appreciate all that you do.
Well, maybe I should have added walking to dive bars in Chinatown with Joe.
Put that on your CV.
Yeah.
hey, that's what mentors are for.
That's right.
All right. Well, to all of our listeners out there on Spotify and Apple, please give us a 5-star rating, and even better, Joe and I are always saying, hey, put some comments in there. We would appreciate that. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. We'll continue to bring you leaders in the profession like Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to maybe doing it again down the road.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
And by the way, we're sending you a Dean's Chat cup for your, your drinking pleasure. All right. All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.